Hey friends, welcome to another week of Outposts. I'm here in my orchard, and today we're talking about what are we steering towards. In other words, what are we cultivating? What are we growing in our life? Now this is an exciting one for me because I get to share with you a little bit of the story of our orchard, but as I share it, I want you to start thinking about the dreams and desires and longings God has put in your heart. And at the end of this session, we're gonna get a chance to talk about those as a group. Man, it is so cool that God is inviting us to do the things that are on our desires. And so here's to the belief that God is so good and so kind that He will use those longings and desires to create beautiful things, or to, I guess we could say, co-create. We work together to create beautiful things on this earth. I'm excited about where this goes, so sit back and enjoy. Hey friends, so this week in talking about components, again, we've been looking at the components of a bike, saying a great bike is made up of great components. In the same way in our faith, great components of our faith equal a life-giving faith. And that's what we're after. Man, especially in a season of the Rona, where we're forced to do all this pandemic stuff, quarantining, slowing down. What a perfect time to evaluate a little bit more. So this week we're looking at the steering, which is all about where are we headed. And in every day of life, we get the decision to decide what we're going to invest in and what we're not going to invest in. Every choice of what to invest in means we're choosing not to invest in other things. And of course, invest, I'm using that word generously, not just money, but in life, what we care about. So a great example is my orchard here. When we bought this house in 2016, immediately we were looking at this little triangle chunk of our land to try to figure out what to do with it. Now at the time it was completely unused. There was weeds that had grown up, there was an old rickety fence. I mean, there was just sort of like no purpose to this section. It was just here. And we've always had the value to use what we've got to the best of our ability. So quickly, the idea of an orchard took root. And man, we started dreaming about it. And there was this first phase before we even got to the place of planting the orchard, which was just preparing. I remember planning, drawing up little ideas, plotting out grids to figure out where everything would go. Just that dreaming phase was so fun. And that phase also included some demolition. It included some leveling of the land and getting it ready so that an orchard could grow here long term. And one of the interesting things about the design is I had to keep the long term in mind. In other words, I had to look at the kind of trees that we were going to plant and how big would they get someday and how would it all fit together. Man, it was such a life-giving season to plan this orchard. And then, of course, we got to the place where it was time to plant. And we bought these bare root trees and dug a bunch of holes in the ground, actually got a tractor to do it. It was so fun to just invest in this land, knowing that what I was planting would grow for years to come. Once we planted the trees, we realized we had to be really conscious of the water and the soil, the insects, the way that we protect these trees from deer that just run rampant. Eventually we made a fence just later this year. I mean, it's just been this whole big planning and then cultivation phase to do that. And then finally, someday, we are gonna reap some major fruit. At least that's the hope, right? I mean, it's kind of cool. I'm sitting right under an old orchard tree that's in our neighbor's yard here. I mean, this tree's probably 50, 60, 70 years old. And so to think that we are preparing for that kind of harvest through all of the work that we're doing, man, it's just incredible. And I got to tell you, the spiritual connections are just, they're everywhere. I feel like as I've been working on this land, I've seen over and over those three phases in our life. There's the design or the intention. There is the cultivation, which is kind of the growing. And then there's reaping the harvest and the fruit. Now, back to the idea of the bike and steering. When you're riding a bike, you get to choose the path you're on. And I got to tell you, this orchard, there's no way it looks like this without a bunch of intentionality. You know, it's like if you want to go to Farmington and you start walking north, you're probably not going to get to Farmington, at least if you're in Durango, right? That old adage comes true. What you invest in, the direction you go, is the fruit you will reap long term. And so today what I want to look at in terms of the components of faith, what did Jesus have to say about the arrow or the direction or the course that we set? What kind of power do we have over what we become? What's the fruit that we want to reap anyway? So to do this, we're going to look at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus has some great words. Again, some words of warning, but some great words about which direction we choose. Let's pick it up together right now. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened to him. And then later Jesus goes on to say, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those that enter it are many. But the gate that is narrow and the way that is hard leads to life, and those who find it are few. It reminds me of a section in the Old Testament. By the way, this is the design phase. This is the intentional phase. This is the you get to create and take the steps that God has invited you to. Just like in the orchard, I had this vision. That's what we're talking about in this section. So it reminds me of the Israelites. And there's this section where Joshua was just about to die, and he had led the people of God into the promised land. They had taken their land. They had started to farm. They had gone from nomadic to permanent farmers. And he knew that the human tendency was to give up on seeking God. And so he says to them in Joshua chapter 24, and if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, then choose this day who you will serve, whether the gods your father served in the region beyond the river, or the gods the Amorites in the lands you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You and I, God has given us incredible choice in who we want to become. And part of that choice comes from longing. You know, it's what is it, Psalms? I think 37:4 says, commit your way to the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. It's like when I saw this plot of land, we longed for a place that would be rich and bearing fruit. We longed for trees that would grow up and stretch over as a canopy over lush grass. You know, we longed for a place where we could gather in the center of that and maybe even throw little parties and just celebrate the goodness of our land together with other people. In the same way in our faith, God uses that longing. It's like that knocking at the door. We experience it in seasons like this where we say, what is the type of person I want to become? What's the invitation that God's giving to me? And how can I become that? And it starts with intention. We could say goals. I mean, we could say a lot of things. The move in current culture is to move towards intention because, you know, frankly, we never get goals done. So we might as well just intend to do something. But regardless, in terms of faith, God is so good that he responds to us when we take these steps to design. Here's the first question for you. What is God inviting you to design right now? What's the kind of life you want to live? What's the kind of person you want to be? Which direction do you want to steer your life? And are you steering your life that way now? You know, it's the best way to know who you'll be in 20 years is to look at who you are today. Now I don't know, maybe that sounds depressing or something, but it's not if today you're giving your life towards the things you value. All right, the second thing kind of goes along with the cultivation of this beautiful orchard. Listen to how God or Jesus talks about cultivation. Again, out of Matthew 7. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Everyone then who hears the words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who builds himself a house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. This may sound depressing. I mean, actually, it's a clear warning. And we've been doing this for a couple weeks now, thinking about warnings. But I got to tell you, it's a hopeful warning. Because at the end of the day, Jesus says, I'm going to let in those who know me. In other words, those who prioritize a relationship with me. You know, in this orchard, I have to actively be cultivating these trees. I can't make them grow, but I can create the surrounding environment to where the growth can happen as God and our earth sees fit. Now, it's the same way in your faith and my faith. There's nothing we can do to make ourselves more loving and peaceful and kind and generous and gentle and just full of love and hope. I mean, those things God forges in us. Those are considered fruits of the Spirit. But what we can do is align our arrow, point our arrow towards Jesus every day. And as we do that, as we work the ground, as we till the garden, as we position ourselves towards God, that is when we long-term get to see the results of the fruit that we're after. You know, somebody said to me once, it's really hard to steer when you're standing still. But the second you get moving, that's when steering becomes very practical. Isn't that so true in our life? What's the encouragement? It's to get going, to start responding to God. I mean, what's God called you to today? And are you saying yes to that? Are you taking risks along those lines? Let's get to the final phase, the reaping the fruit, you know, the part that we all want to talk about. Here's what Jesus goes on to say in Matthew 7. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits. This is actually the most obvious and helpful part of this section, I think, of the orchard. You know, all this work that I've put in cultivating this, I'm just pumped for the day that I get to reap the harvest. And I don't expect to reap a harvest of thorn bushes or some kind of random berry that doesn't grow here. No, that's because this is how our spiritual lives work. And this is how our natural world works. We reap the fruit that we sow into. In other words, what we invest in is what we reap. I think in our world, we are obsessed about getting fruit now. You know, it's the microwave culture. I mean, you've heard us talk about it, where we just sort of expect all the spiritual stuff to happen immediately. Somebody wants to start following God, and tomorrow they want to be receiving all the good things that God has for them. And you know, it just doesn't work that way. We have to intentionally intend to put our energy towards what God has for us, and then in due time, our rewards will reap the fruit that we desire. As we close, I want to read a scripture that I think just so clearly states how our desires for faith need to work out in the actions that we take. It comes from James. Listen to this. For what good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things they need for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. I just got to tell you, God has put in us dreams, desires, and longings that were meant to come to fruition on this earth. But they're not going to come to fruition right away. They come to fruition through long, faithful plodding. As we say, it's long obedience in the same direction. Actually, Eugene Peterson said that. But I like that. That's a great descriptor of what discipleship or faith is. As we say in this orchard, it's keep showing up. Just keep doing the things that the orchard needs, and the fruit will come. And it's the same in your life. You know, I was thinking about my outpost, and this is how I want to close. Every single person in my outpost is taking significant steps of faith towards God. I just want to hear, without sort of telling everybody's story, some of the things that people in our outpost are pursuing faith in the context of right now. One guy's pursuing a new job. Another person is actually, this couple is just finally going to church together, trying to figure out if God can be trusted and if he's real. Another couple is doing ministry during COVID and trying to find God being real in that. Another couple just moved here, trying to find God in the riskiness of a new city. Two couples have just adopted kids, and they're giving their lives towards loving these kids as their own. We've got another young person who is just started a new job amidst of caring for their kids and just is embracing all of the factors that come from that. We've got some Fort Lewis students that are processing how to bring faith to the college. And we've got a person that's writing a book amidst chaos in their own life, a book that tells the goodness and glory of God. And one member who's trying to pick a school and take a risk, believing that God will be in that. Now, these are just part of their stories, but here's my point. When you show up to an outpost, when you show up in full faith, in action in your life, that is where God is working in this environment, just like this orchard, that will produce the fruit you and I desire in our life. All right, guys, it's question time. We're going to do things a little differently this week, and that is we're just going to ask one big question and give ourselves some time to talk and process this. Here's the scripture I want to read first. It comes from Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for a welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Specifically, I want you to each look at your life about a dream that God has given you, or a way of living or acting, or a hope that God has given you. And what I want you to do is just kind of lead the discussion around these three ideas. First, the design or the intention around that. That is, before that hope became real in any way, what did it look like to start dreaming or acting? And some of you are going to be right there today. Then I want you to talk about what are you doing to cultivate that dream? And some of you are going to be right there in the middle of the cultivation, where you haven't experienced the fruit, but you're doing things actively. Finally, I want to talk a little bit. Some of you have actually reaped a fruit from these dreams. So here's the idea today. I actually want you guys to dream with each other a little bit and just share from your heart a little bit. This is a different direction this week. This is more a what if, or what could be, or what God might be doing in our life. As you have these discussions, man, just know that God is so pleased with you. He loves you, and He is with you in these dreams. God bless you.